Welcome back, everybody. We are on our 5th installment of Flow Life, which is doing sort of a deep dive from a lot of different angles into the Adam Newman and Mark Andreessen new venture into some sort of tech-centered rental housing real estate shenanigans. And I'm really excited today to have my friend Brandi along with me. And Brandi is based in Florida. So I thought that there would be some really nice insights. And Brandi, we've been wanting to have this conversation for a while, haven't we?
Yeah, for a while.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. And Brandi's kind of on the front lines of navigating housing policy and sustainability, and you live in the greater Palm Beach area, is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about sort of where you're situated for people?
Yeah, so I'm in Palm Beach County, which is South Florida, Southeast Florida, and I'm in Boynton Beach. So Palm Beach is a huge county, and it's pretty much where a lot of the billionaires moved to. Jeffrey Epstein, actually the one bank is moving down here now. There's tons of real estate down here that's getting bought up every day. And I'm in a condo, and I'm surrounded by mangroves and the intercoastal. So it's pretty much like prime real estate. And I've been seeing how, what they'll actually do to try to take property from people, and the policies that they're implementing, and how they're raising insurance costs and everything like that to pretty much push people out of their homes that live on the water or just in Palm Beach in general.
Yeah.
And it's happening everywhere across Florida.
And how has the last couple of years been, like, in terms of so many people relocating?
It's been crazy. Basically since probably 2020, millions, I think, have moved since then. I would say, like, a lot of older people have, a lot of people from New York, New Jersey, California, Texas, even Pennsylvania, just in droves, people are coming here.
Yeah.
And it's slowing down.
But you guys are supposed to be sinking under the ocean, right?
Yep, we're supposed to be, but they don't seem to care.
I know, they're still pouring a lot of money into the state, right?
Yep, a lot of it.
Well,
and
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, I was just gonna start. So, when I was looking into Flow, which is again this the focus of this series, which is Adam Newman, who used to be of WeWork, and Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, or A16Z, who is a major leader in Web3. They're going into this new real estate venture around rental housing. And so when I looked initially, the WeWork program, they didn't purchase real estate. The WeWork people acquired long-term leases, and then they retrofit the space, and then they subleased these sort of micro payments for their membership base for the space. But now they're actually buying property in this new venture, Flow. And so it turns out some of the very first investments they've been made are in Miami. So can you, I know that you're north of Miami, but for people who are watching, can you sort of characterize a little bit of maybe the dynamics of South Florida?
South Florida is it's really diverse in our population. Like, we have people from Haiti, from South America, from pretty much everywhere across the country, but a lot of South American people that come here, and Haiti as well. Like, Haiti's a really big one as well, because we're so close.
Yeah.
And Cubans, you've got every demographic that you could possibly think of in Florida, and especially Miami. Miami's filled with people that have come from other countries and decided to live there. So when you come from another country, you're either in Miami or Southeast Florida, where I'm at. They'll come up, everybody will come Palm Beach. They'll even go further than that, but Miami's pretty much the one that everybody moves there. So It's a huge populated, diverse area.
And a lot of real estate money there.
A lot of money there. as well.
And a lot of money flowing in. There's a lot of connections to New York, right?
A ton.
Yeah. So this isn't like a huge surprise, especially since A16Z is a Web3 company. So, that's something that we've been looking at for a while now is, Miami as being this sort of crypto hub.
It is.
Yeah. Yep. And they're all in, like the government is all in on this. And I think, in fact, a lot of the people who probably moved from outside into Florida were imagining as some sort of like more free market libertarian like opportunity that crypto intersects with all of that. So, and they love to bring people in on that game.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so gosh, it's been like, I was looking at the date of this. It's been like 3 months since we started working on this map. Yeah. And I think initially it's off this part of the map, but you had showed me a plan around sustainability and storm sea level rise or storm rise for southern Florida, including up into Palm Beach County. And so I was like, okay, well, let's start sort of mapping out both what's going on in Palm Beach broadly, because your activism has also been around the education space. I know locally, that was sort of part of some of the things that you've been talking about. And at the top of this map, I included some context for Florida that I think is useful in thinking about what's coming with this Web3 housing innovation. And it included a digital identity, that Florida is pursuing that, and a blockchain task force. Do you think that people who imagine Florida as a freedom state really understand what's going on with those things?
I don't think so. And if they do, they only scratch the surface of it, so they don't really understand how they think that Florida is like immune to it, but when in reality, it's the complete opposite. They're just doing it and advertising it as a freedom. Like I saw Trump the other day was doing like an ad for his campaign or whatever. And it was like freedom cities. We're going to have freedom cities. And then you have DeSantis, who's the governor, touting that and basically saying like, Florida's free. We're the anti-lockdown state, blah, blah, blah. But then behind the scenes, they don't realize like how much money is already going into blockchain and Web3 and digital ID and all of the things that we talk about. They don't really understand like that it's actually still moving and it's still going to happen here too.
Exactly. Well, and I was really, I wouldn't say shocked, but I hadn't really looked at DeSantis that much. But I mean, he comes out of Yale and Harvard and the Navy and like naval law. Too. I mean, yeah, the legal, because that's the whole maritime law, like this aspect of states of exception, like legal states of exception in war or on the high seas are very much alike Ethereum, these smart contracts. And then to see that a lot of these big hedge fund people are backing him, right, from the north, including Jeff Yass, who is someone I've been talking about in my series, and Paul Tudor Jones, who's one of these key figures in human capital finance, and Ken Griffin with Citadel, and then Stephen Ross. We're going to talk about Stephen Ross a little bit later, but he redeveloped Hudson Yards in New York, but he got his start in affordable, not just building affordable housing, but trading the credits, the tax credits that went with affordable housing, and his anchor point was in South Florida.
Yep. It doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Because they have a whole workforce housing thing that they're doing too. Yeah. That they're all pretty much investing in and trying to. And so
it's interwoven.
Yeah. Totally. It's all connected. It's kind of crazy when you look at it.
Right. I mean, and I would think Florida even more so than Texas, because I don't imagine a lot of New Yorkers wintering in Dallas. Maybe they'll visit for work, but like they're in Florida.
Definitely in Florida everywhere down here.
Yeah.
I think more than Texas, definitely.
Well, I was shocked because I think when I was looking at Palm Beach that it said that they had, I don't know, like 30 or 50 billionaires. And I'm like, I can't even imagine what that's like. Now, is there a state income tax in Florida? I don't know that there is. Is that why it's attractive?
Yeah, it's really attractive for the taxes pretty much. And I mean, Florida, that's why everybody moves down here, is because property taxes are so much cheaper, no income tax. It's a lot, you would think it used to be a lot cheaper. Now it's definitely not. So you make up for it in rent and insurance and everything else. So
Right.
It's attractive for billionaires, but not for regular people.
Right.
Know?
But I mean, where you're based, you're in an area that your units have both longtime residents who are like came in under the way it used to be, and then newer residents who are coming in with more
money.
Yeah. So there's.
It used to be this building used to be a fisherman building. It used to be working class, mid-class fishermen who would come in and go off with their charter boats or go fishing. And the developer who actually built the building that I'm living in is famous. It's called the Boynton Beach Apartments, and he built all of our entire street pretty much. And he owns he doesn't, but his daughter's husband owns Geno 5 charter fishing. So it's it used to be a really big fishing community, and now it's changing really quickly.
Okay, so I'm just going to hit on a couple of other things about just the broader state of Florida that I thought were interesting. It's the 4th in the nation in terms of video game development. I know this from my education work that the Advanced Distributed Learning program that was doing a lot of the VR gaming for the military, that was based in Orlando. And there's like a big hub of military simulation technology in the Orlando area. And then Southcom, which is this U.S. Southern Command unit that's looking at Latin America. Essentially, it's the U.S. military's door into Latin America, is based in Doral, Florida. And once you think about, you mentioned South Florida having so many people from South America, that's all human capital, especially also in immigrants and displaced people. Like, I mean, there's immigration from Haiti and, various things like that. Having that access point to human capital in Latin America through the tech, I think is really important. A Geo Group.
It's perfect for it.
Like Geo Group is based in Boca Raton. And Geo Group is one of the largest private prison companies in the world.
And that's like 25 minutes from me.
Yeah. And so like Core Civic and Geo Group now are like moving into what they call Continuum of Care, which is almost like e-carceration, or so much of the Pay for Success finance is based on metrics against recidivism. Like you have someone involved in the judicial system, and then you get them in on a pathway of self-improvement, and then they create these financial instruments that are based on like not reoffending. So when you've got these private prison companies, now they're pivoting. They're like, they don't want to be in the business of building giant buildings to hold people. There's a lot more data if you can nonviolent offenses bring people in, process them, and then push them back out. So I think that's really important. So Geo Group is in Boca Raton, and Core Civic, I think, is in Memphis, so Tennessee.
Memphis?
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. Memphis or Nashville. I know it's in Tennessee. So
a lot of people here from there, too.
Oh, interesting. The United Way is really big in Florida on workforce development and collective impact, and that's something Lynn and I often talk about. In Miami, they have a social finance program where they're like doing coding boot camps for people to reskilling people into coding, and it's called Geeks Academy, and I think those folks are actually the founders are out of Latin America and working on around the children, Success by 6, mobilizing America's children. So there's this like 2-generation double dip on impact finance there. Does that sound right? Like the United Way?
Yeah.
Like they're movers and shakers all over.
They're huge down here.
Yeah.
They're huge down here.
And then the other thing is, so I've talked before about the Learning Economy Foundation, this idea that you're going to have a wallet. This is backed by the World Bank, and you're going to have your money and your crypto gaming and your skills and your passports and your geolocation, like all in this wallet. And this is backed by the World Bank. But in the U.S., the 2 pilots are the state of Colorado and Broward, which I guess is sort of the greater Miami-ish area.
It's like Miami-Dade, Broward County, and then Palm Beach. So it's like all
together.
It's not far from me at all.
And then let's see. I'm looking at, the ALICE program, which is the working poor managed by the United Way, that there was a community care, healthcare impact project with the Quantum Foundation in Palm Beach. There is going to be this push now for wellness behaviors. And this is where I keep saying, like with the resistance folks, it's not just about like this one, certain kind of health intervention. Really what they want is to get everybody on wearable tech and then track them that way.
And they're doing that more now. Like you said, with the prison thing, I have a friend who lives in the other apartment that I was telling you about before, who just got a DUI, and he's 22, really young, came from Nicaragua. I don't know how, I never pronounce that right, but Nicaragua, or however you say it. And he came here, like, I think when he was like 15 or 16. Really hardworking kid, nice guy, speaks great English. He's just such a nice person. But we cook dinners all the time together. And I helped him out because he got the DUI and he didn't really understand how big of a deal that is when you get one down here or anywhere, to be honest. And so I said I would help him out. So I took him to see a lawyer because he was going to the ticket clinic, which is, you don't go there for a DUI. And I got him into a different lawyer. And I noticed that just this week, actually, I got some of his paperwork back, and they want him to not only do the thing in the car where you have to blow, but they also want him to do the probation. They also want data from him. So they want him to fill out like a 3 or 4 page survey. They want to know like where he's going to be. They pretty much want to track him for like his entire probation period, which is normal. Like for probation, you have to check in every now and then, but they want more than that. They want more information. They want him to fill things out. And I couldn't believe like how invasive it was just for the one charge that he got. And I've never seen that before, ever.
Wow. So
I thought that was pretty interesting that you mentioned that, because I could totally see that.
Yeah. I think it's going to be very much about trackable technology and data.
Yep.
Yep. So I have a slide here. It has like one headline that says, "As Bitcoin plummets, Miami vows to hold on to its crypto dreams." And that was from this past December. And then I was trying to remember back, because for me, what's more interesting than the crypto finance is really the smart contracts and the way that this Ethereum layer in the smart contracts is going to interface with smart cities. So I was trying to remember about the origin story of Ethereum, and I came across this history of Ethereum, and it was describing Vitalik Buterin, who had this white paper that was published in the fall of 2013, but it went public essentially in early 2014. It says, when Buterin brought the concept of the blockchain project into the public eye at a Bitcoin conference in Miami. So it's interesting to me that I think a lot of times the spotlight is on the fintech side of things, which is definitely the first phase. But I think then the next phase is like the cybernetic steering through the sensor technology. And I don't know if you sort of see this. It's a bit odd, but the cover image for this history of Ethereum, it has their logo with the sort of Platonic whatever tetrahedrons or whatever on there, like pyramids, but in the middle is like a legless ant figure. It's a bit strange, but it has these like little electronic antenna.
The ant computer.
It's like the ant computer, right? Since the beginning, the ant computer. So again, like I think this role of Florida in Web3 is really key. And then I know what's so big right now as everyone's talking about the 15-minute city concept. And like, I think that's meant to mostly keep people just from digging in too deep on the particulars. But I did find, this is from the a journal of like New Urbanism, and it says that Miami tops the list of the 15-minute city, which is kind of interesting, because I wouldn't really, I kind of think of 15-minute cities as more like villages or something, or purpose-built, but I guess they're looking to break out bigger cities into these smaller units.
Miami's kind of a perfect experiment too, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The way that some areas you could totally make into a 15-minute city down there, because everything in Florida is, well, at least in South Florida, for me, it's like driving like in a square. So it's all pretty much the way that it's laid out. I mean, it would totally make sense to do that.
Like from geolocation? Totally,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I think we've talked about before a little bit is this idea of the opportunity zones. And, what you were saying is in Florida that one street can be the difference between very affluent and people at very low incomes. And it's just a very clear division.
Like just where I live right now, I'll show you.
Look at the mangroves. They're so pretty.
I know. I love them. But that water right there is the only thing that divides me from rich people. Literally. It's like I could like canoe over to their side. I mean, and then if you go inland, if you go west, like I'm right off of Martin Luther King. So it's literally just separated by a street. It's totally bizarre down here, but that's how it is.
Right. So they could come in and like just chunk out a section to be like with geolocation, like you're the 15-minute city for this county, or you're one of 10.
It's so segregated.
It's interesting. Well, the other piece, and I know that this is kind of a lame thing, and I know that I think Philadelphia was maybe on the short list of being part of this city coin project, but they float these ideas way out in advance of the real use case. But this idea that people would like independently do mining and earn these coins that would go into like a civic wallet. And Miami was the first city to like sign up for the City Coin project. And, I'm sure it's like gone to the back burner right now. But if you sort of mesh this idea of a 15-minute city or a geolocated wellness zone for low-income people that are like prime redevelopment, human capital potential things, that you could use these coins. They literally say here, it says Miami coin gives citizens and supporters, because the people who hold the coin don't actually live in the town. Like they're going to be like the Mark Andreessens, right? Citizens and supporters, the power, and there's like a weird energy thing there, to support, improve, and program the Magic City. Program the Magic City. Isn't that amazing? Program it with the tokens.
Wow.
Like, I mean, so to me, that really, and then it's sort of the magenta-y color too, but like, yeah. So, and it says that developers can create apps that use Miami Coin for access control to digital or physical space, for trading, lending, smart contract executions, and much more.
I'm sure they'd never abuse that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking about like what is going on with this idea of equity, with Adam Newman saying that they're going to share some sort of equity with the people that create value in their community.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like there's an interleaving of, if you're a good citizen, you can earn tokens. If you
recycle your garbage, then
right.
you get freedom tokens.
Right. If your kids attend the charter school regularly,
Yep.
Or just log in for their virtual school, all that stuff. Yeah. So, okay, so I'm going to run this clip. So this kind of speaks to what we talked about earlier about Florida being the like catching zone for so many people, remote workers, and people who've like relocated, is that what he's saying is that Silicon Valley was too limiting. And now that since they all went remote, oh my goodness, COVID, so terrible, but also a miracle, that now they can spread out everywhere. And so I feel like this is a colonization project by Silicon Valley to like move to a lot of mid-sized cities in other places. And I imagine like Florida would be a location for that. So here, let's see. Let's listen to Mark.
We made a very deliberate decision when we started our firm in 2009 that we were really deeply going to invest in the office, and in particular in one office. And so we were kind of semi-notorious in the industry for we only ever had one office. The office was in Menlo Park, California. This is actually controversial even in the Bay Area, because there were lots of startups were actually in San Francisco. Lots of the younger people who worked for us lived up in San Francisco, and we said, sorry, and everybody every year was like, we got to put up an office in San Francisco. And we're like, nope, single office. Everybody's going to be in the office. And the reason for that was we wanted the beehive effect. Like we wanted people when they walk in, both the people who work for us, but also the people who are visiting us, to really feel like they were tapping into energy. They were seeing lots of other interesting people. That this was like the kind of environment, and the kinds of people they'd want to be around. Like everybody else, in March of 2000, like we shut that down, and we went, completely online. And like everybody else, we were shocked that we were able to continue to run the firm, basically keep everything going. We actually have quite a few companies that have actually elected to actually stay very office centric, which is actually a very interesting counter-programming thing that some people are doing now. But, generally speaking, our companies were indicating that they were going to become more flexible and they were going to really start to spread out. And then the industry just felt like it was going to expand. And we were seeing, a lot of founders who were frustrated being in the Bay Area, basically left over this period, and they went to other places and they started companies. And so we basically decided, like, we can't be in the business of partnering with people who are building the future if we're not living in the future ourselves. And so we basically said, we'll just do a hard reset. We'll become, sort of, say remote remote-centric or sort of virtual-centric. Actually, the WeWork model being ahead of its time, we're going to have more smaller offices and more locations. So we're going to accommodate. We're not a, we're an investment operation, not a product company. So we don't have like, assembly lines or software, kind of, production. So we have a simpler version of the problem, but we're letting our teams decide basically how to distribute. So we have some teams that want to be in person. We have some teams that want to be remote. And I would say, I think it's, so we're doing all that.
All right. So yeah, we kind of get the point. So they're like, break free from California, right?
Everywhere.
And send it everywhere.
Yep.
I mean, have you noticed like tech people around?
Oh yeah, totally. Like, I mean, I have a guy 2 doors down from me who is a tech person that moved from California, and now he's living here, and it's everywhere, especially in Palm Beach. I've noticed a lot of people that are in tech that have come down here, and they usually, all of them are mainly from California or Texas, which Texas,
Yeah,
too.
interesting.
It's also free, but
Yeah. Also very techy. Well, and then I'm going to just do this one really quick. I'm going to just listen for when he talks, that he's talking to Steve Case.
It didn't happen. I mean, think of prop tech companies and technology. I was talking to Steve Case before for a second about prop tech and a little bit about all the different innovations.
So he's like, yeah, I was talking with Steve Case about prop tech and all the innovations. And so Cliff and I spent a little bit more time talking about prop tech in that episode, but essentially it's this idea of property management. So it's also property sales like Zillow. It's like the sharing economy like Airbnb. It's also like access and smart buildings and like property management portfolios, like all of that stuff is prop tech. Which I hadn't even heard of that as like a thing. But then I was looking at Steve Case, who used to be with Time Warner and AOL. And so the deal, and now he has his own social finance foundation that's around like alternative payment systems called Revolution. And in this profile, I guess he wrote a book called The Rise of the Rest. And it says it borrows from the seed stage fund Revolution, which he started in 2014. After nearly 2 decades of pushing for better access to resources for entrepreneurs in overlooked parts of the country, it seems as if the tide might be turning in Case's direction. So he was like the tech guy who was like in middle America saying like, bring it, bring it to Minneapolis, bring it to Kansas City, bring it to all of these like the what work cities, the Michael Bloomberg what work cities. And so the fact that they're connected. I was just talking with Steve, my buddy Steve, about the prop tech. And then I have this map. This is part of the DeCent map, the decentralized democracy. And he was in this map here as the co-founder of AOL and on the board of Revolution, which was an alternative payment processing. Oh, guess what? Based in St. Petersburg, Florida. So wow. Steve Case must be down in Florida. And he has a social impact foundation, his Case Foundation. But at the time that he was part of this Time Warner merge with AOL, it didn't work out. It was like a total, they called it a train wreck. This other guy named Stan Stalnaker was there. And he was like a marketing director for Fortune magazine. But later on, Stan Stalnaker went on to develop something called Hub Culture. It was a while ago in 2002. It was an invitation-only social network, but for like very elite people. And it was like on the vanguard of digital payment, this Ven currency, international co-working spaces. You had your own private cryptocurrency exchange. During the lockdowns, they had their own special quarantine passports. And it was all, and it was connected through this Windhover principles of digital ID, which goes over to John Clippinger over at MIT. So this hub culture, if you look it up, it's kind of like weird, but it's weird because it was so early and like now everything is catching up. But it was like working out the kinks to this different stuff. The fintech, the co-working, the international globetrotters, the digital identity for the elite people. And so I feel like this is all what's going on in the background with Steve Case and his push to like bring the entrepreneurship vibe to like, middle America, where it's going to be a lot cheaper to do this kind of these real estate deals in other places. Like I know Florida is super expensive, but like if you can bring that to, you know, Tulsa or, you know, these places, they're going to make a lot of money.
Yep.
And then, I was just looking up, I added this morning, but it says, Mark Andreessen's like, well, we're not having our Menlo Park thing anymore. We're like, we did that already. And now we're going to be spread out. And by the way, we're going to come to Miami. One of our dispersed office locations will be in Miami. So that goes right back to, you know, they're buying buildings in Miami. Andreessen Horowitz is coming to Miami. And, which brought me back around. In one of the earlier segments, we were talking about the fact that Mayoshi-san with SoftBank and his Vision Fund, which was backed by the Saudis, poured so much money into WeWork. And it was when Mayoshi-san turned off the tap that like Adam Newman had to go public and have this IPO that supposedly like brought down his downfall. But I was thinking about it just this morning, and Raul had written a piece a while ago, I think even before he did, on his previous blog, that talked about SoftBank in Miami. So I'm like, oh, let me go back and look at that this morning. Like, what's going on with that? And one of the key people featured was this guy, let's see, I think it's Marcelo Claure, Claure. And he, I'm trying to remember, I think he was Bolivian. He went to school in Massachusetts. He like parlayed a gig in soccer, like the international soccer scene. Then he acquired like a telecom company that got bought out by SoftBank. And like through that telecom company, he rose up and became CEO of Sprint for some time. And then he was like a really high level person with SoftBank. So here, this is from January of 2023. It says, billionaire Claure takes up new office in Miami's crypto scene. So he's on it like a do not compete for a while, but he's bought out a whole floor. They describe him as a $2 billion fortune, made a fortune as a deputy to SoftBank founder Mayoshi-san, who's like this with WeWork. And while he's waiting for the end of his non-compete clause, he's charting his own investment firm that takes up an entire floor at the Wynwood Plaza that would fit close to 100 people. That's huge, right?
Yeah, I'm looking up the building right now because I've heard of that area.
And then, so this is what it says that he's going to get into next, okay? Claure has previously said his firm will invest in, get this, quote, a combination of everything, including real estate, technology, gaming, and crypto.
Wow.
Real estate, technology, gaming, and crypto. That is the game. Exactly. They're building out the game board in Miami. They're totally building out the game board in Miami.
Yep.
And like once they have it, and actually one of the, let me go back. I didn't talk about it here, but like a while back we saw that there was a project called the Little Haiti Coin. And it was in a neighborhood in Little Haiti out in Miami, and that people would do litter picking up. And there would be some sort of Internet of Thing enabled sensor technology, and that it was linked to international remittances, which again, that's a huge business, is the finance of like all the people who are immigrants who are also working and sending money home. So there was this like alternative work system of like very basic labor linked to, I mean, I think they had this, a superhero figure, like the crypto coin superhero guy, and he was with the mayor, and again, like targeting, vulnerable populations, and saying like, oh, we're here to like just clean up your neighborhood finally, right? And then once they clean up the neighborhood, then the real estate investors will come and scoop out the land and like turn it into a game. Anyway, I just
it up for them.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. And so I'm just gonna like listen to, this is this is Adam Newman talking about this new kind of equity for renters. So I'm just saying, just think about what this guy just said, Claure. I'm investing in a combination of everything, including real estate, technology, gaming, and crypto. The way in which like navigating the rental market and these smart communities will be like a game.
Well, we have 4 pillars as we're looking at the business today. We have the first one, which is a branded technology-first management company that actually runs the buildings.
Branded technology first management company. Okay.
We have an asset management or real estate fund or real estate company that actually owns the buildings. And something cool about our new business, we actually own buildings together already.
So I think this is later on, we're going to talk about Stephen Ross, and like they're pitching this mostly as like upwardly professional, like luxury apartments. But I think the big market is going to be in workforce housing and like transitional housing. So they're going to sell you one story like, oh, we're just making lovely luxury homes for tech families, like upwardly mobile tech families. But really they're like creating like the market is going to be in budget rate, like containment zones for people navigating poverty and addiction, or, you know, elderly people.
Yep.
And then we have a financial services company. So number 1, management company, branded technology first. Number 2, real estate asset management, a company that can buy real estate and asset manage real estate. Number 3, financial services.
Financial services. So he's going to go on to say like, well, like 30 or 40% of your wallet spend is already on your rent. So why wouldn't you just go through us? Like we'll just one-stop shop and we'll just hold all of it.
And the 4th pillar is this mechanism that's going to take some of the value and share it with the value creators.
And so I was trying to talk about this a little bit with Leo, but this idea, again, it's what story are you telling? And I sort of feel like they're going to take these low-income housing developments and they're going to package them up with LEED certifications and affordable housing certifications and opportunity zone things, and like stack and stack and stack all these incentives, and then add in some corruption and trading, and then pad their budgets, and then create side businesses in their financial services divisions, like predatory lending for poor people, and then say that they're going to give you equity in the value you create, which means under surveillance in the panopticon, the good behavior.
Yeah.
It's just a shame, because I'm just trying to put it together. Like what, and then so the other thing I'm going to talk about a little bit is the educational stuff, because I know you've talked about that a lot before, is the Learn card. And so this is actually a clip that Jason shared with me. It was from ETH Denver, and this idea of Huma, which is a wallet. It's essentially lending based on future payments, future revenue. So I've talked before about the income sharing agreements for tuition, where you say someone will invest in you for your tuition and then you garnish your wages moving forward. I think this is that with not even tuition. They want to frame it as a crypto credit card where you're drawing against future earnings. So imagine this gets baked into your affordable housing rental agreement. Like, and you've got a permanent ledger of getting a cash advance to meet some unexpected need. You know, your kid breaks their arm or something and you got to go to the hospital. Yeah. And then you get sucked into this payment system.
Wow.
Last year, my team attended ETH Denver Hackathon and won the DeFi track. We went on and launched the company based on the demo. Now, 1 year later, we are back as a sponsor. This is pretty awesome, right? And I hope some of you guys will get a chance to do the same as well. Our mission is to power DeFi for the 99%. We do so by supporting various real-world lending use cases. For example, in our initial launch, partnered with Request Network and Superfluid, we allow people to borrow against their receivables, such as their invoices or payment streams. The borrowing is fully collateralized, but the user does not have to pay a token from their wallet because we use their future income as a collateral.
Future income as collateral.
Yep.
And see, the thing is, people are just marks because they don't even know any of this is going on. They have no idea what's coming.
This is pretty awesome, right?
Awesome.
And the good news is that we not only support this, with the Huma protocol, there is so much more amazing experience you can enable. I'm pleased to share we have 5 bounties with a total reward of 25,000 USDC. Because of time, I will only highlight one bounty. It is credit line for every wallet. We want to enable the experience that the user can access credit from the wallet. In a way, make the wallet work more like a credit card. I know some of you guys would say this is crazy and awesome. Yes, indeed. And the good news is that with the human protocol and account abstraction, we think this is pretty much durable. We put quite some thoughts in the bounty as an inspiration for you to get started. Please take a look. I'm sure you can take much further than what we have. We also have a few other bounties, such as non-humor for the new payment network, or non-humor for the real-world lending use cases.
It's going to be like crazy payday lending on crypto in a permanent ledger tied to your housing.
Yeah. And workforce housing down here is huge too.
Yeah.
And I think recently they wanted people to vote for the housing bond, even though they previously, I think they had like $11 million that they completely wasted, or they allocated it to somewhere else and they're not telling people where it went. But now I think they're getting another 10 million for their workforce housing programs. So they're probably just going to tie it all in together.
Yeah.
And make deals. And I mean, they have incentives for the developers. So, I mean, if they own, like the other guy, if he owns the building, then they already have everything that they need set up pretty much.
Yeah. I know.
I mean, it's
well,
terrible.
and the thing is, like with the workforce housing, I talked about this some in the chat with Lynn. Okay, so we need housing for teachers or EMTs or civil servants or whatever. Right. Then that's a public good. So then they'll frame it as a public good, and then they'll get a credit for being like the good people, right? Somebody has to pick up the trash at the billionaires' houses, until they have robots to do that. Like, at least for now, there's still people involved. And so it's all going to be part of, a public goods effort, even though it's going to benefit all the developers. And I mean, that's sort of the thing about Florida. There's always the joke about, if you believe that, I have some swampland to sell you or whatever.
Yep.
And
they'll buy it too.
Right. And Florida has been so much about real estate, the scams. I mean, all sorts of scams within scams of real estate and cutting deals. And
it's so bad.
Like tokenized crypto real estate will totally be the next thing. So I just have a slide here that talks about the Broward County, the Learning Economy Foundation, and the digital wallet. So like if you go back and you think about what he's saying, like every wallet is a credit card with a line of credit against future wages. Think about that, right? So you've got affordable housing, right, with a charter school or a virtual school set up, and then all of that is feeding into the wallet. There's all of that data and it's feeding into the wallet as well. That's pretty wild. Because I could totally see, they literally have said that your education credentials and your money and your mobility will all be in one place.
Yeah.
And I don't think people are putting all of this stuff together yet.
No, not at all.
Well, and then the guy, oh gosh, what's his name? So Claure. So Claure, and this is out of Raul's article, Rich Man's Dog, is talking about his ties to Mayoshi-san, and his telecom company was Bright Star. And then as like the deputy or chief operating officer of SoftBank, he was operating out of Latin America specifically. That was his division. And also overseeing the operations of Boston Dynamics, which is the robot dogs. So this is his background, but what Raul mentioned, and then I found a little bit more information, was that this guy, Claure, he with Nicholas Negroponte co-founded the One Laptop, One Child program out of MIT Media Lab, which was using this kind of strange, low-cost, durable laptop and sending them to people in Africa. And like it kind of was a waste, but like this same guy with SoftBank is deeply embedded in ed tech.
And I think that guy also took money from Epstein as well, Nicholas Negroponte. He was also involved with Epstein because a lot of Epstein's work was also funding everything like this.
Yeah.
Technology and
complexity and robots and global
and
brains and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wilson, like a lot of the some of the sociobiology, he was funding that too. So I was just, oh gosh. And I know it might seem like, well, what does education have to do with real estate? But I have a few slides later. A lot of these private, and this is bringing me back to my education days, is that there's a lot of layered real estate development stuff built around charter schools.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Do you want to say a little bit about the school choice stuff in Florida? I know this was from March 10th. It says bills to expand Florida's school voucher programs are on a fast track. The previous year, Governor DeSantis signs the largest school choice expansion in history, U.S. history. And then there was another one from last year. Florida school choice bill has a hidden reform, part-time enrollment. It seems like Florida and Texas are both set up to be like the Wild West of,
it's just like they're just basically doing whatever they want. I mean, I also remember when it came to the education stuff, the school choice was kind of like on the back burner, like I think on purpose, so that people didn't actually really look into it, because it would be so politicized that it was you're either for school choice or you're not. Right. And what they were like missing all in between that was, I think we've talked about this before actually. Anyway, there was this other girl that I used to go to the meetings with to speak out against the education stuff. She actually started championing the school choice, and basically like down here, I mean, they make it sound like it's such a good thing, like people can choose where they want to go, but it's really not like that at all, It's like the complete opposite. And I think that Palm Beach County is actually going to be one of those places that it's just like they're hyper focused on it. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Because the person that I'm thinking of, I can't think of her name, but because she did like a whole thing about school choice in Florida.
Is there a lot of like homeschooling stuff, or are people?
Well, there is. It's main, like there's a lot of. So that was the other thing, was there was like a huge push for like homeschool, and but the problem is like there's still going to be like, you might get to choose the school or whatever, and even if you're homeschooling, you're still going to have to sign on to like these online education programs, which is just taking all of the data anyway.
Right.
And then he also ended like besides the school choice thing, he also ended the testing every year.
Oh, and people were
Remember?
really, the standardized testing.
It was just all the time data gathering instead. So
people think he's like a hero, sort of like in the education space for now.
But they ignored all the other stuff. So it was pretty bad.
Well, and that's part of, what Lynn and I talk about is the fact that when they give you a voucher, it's going to come with data and expectation of data collection. And they're going to do it in the name of transparency and accountability, right? Like they'll create things that are like egregious oversteps, and then they'll say, oh, look, we need this to be accountable to make sure that you're learning all the right things and have all your skills badges. And that's something in Palm Beach, a lot of the money was coming from the MacArthur Foundation for the ed tech and digital learning, and they were all about the badges.
Yeah.
And then I have this, it's just sort of making the linking between charter schools and development authorities, that often the charter schools are part of mixed use developments. So this is an article from last December. The Academica charter school operators propose an apartment complex in Miami-Dade County. And it said, well, some of the apartments will be for teachers, so you've got the workforce housing stuff in there, and then and essentially they wanted a zoning variance to have multifamily because it wasn't zoned for the density that they wanted. But they were like, well, if you don't give us our density, like how are we going to address this problem with housing inventory and crazy prices? You have to give us our zoning variance, or you're contributing to the affordable housing problem. So like that's why they're cramming everybody in. And I would say, on the one hand, I live in a townhouse. I live like in a compact urban neighborhood, but at the same time, what's coming is going to be micro unit housing, tiny houses. And it's not going to the affordable thing is just all managed. I mean, I don't know if you're in a position to speak to this, but there was somebody that I was talking to in South Florida, and she was working in like cooperatives, and also some of the cooperatives were like mobile home communities.
Co-ops?
And those were structured as co-ops, like as affordable housing. This idea of people who lived in like land that was arranged as a cooperative, and then those were getting bought out, and the rates were like going astronomically high. So essentially that as a low cost option for people is just getting taken off the table.
All of it is, yeah. So that's it's similar to what's happening with the condo industry as well, with the co-ops and even the land that trailer parks are in. They also have like POAs, which is like property owners associations. I mean, they're just, everything that's affordable is pretty much getting eaten up and completely turned around to be totally unaffordable. And, you know, they're using it. And Palm Beach County also opened another school just recently, a new school on Lyons Road, I think like Lake Worth or Lantana Road. I have to Google it again, but they just opened a brand new school as well down here.
Like a charter school or like a regular public school? Do you know?
Let me look it up, because I think it was literally, they just did it. It'll open in August of 2023. And it's saying that it's the community who's coming. And if you allow them to help build it as students and families, then you are going to have a lot better buy-in. And it's just a new campus. And it says it's modeled more like a college with the best new technology, security, academics, and athletics, focusing on technology. And then it says
the coding. Yeah, we're training the Web3 coders. Yeah.
Yep. I'm not sure if it's a charter actually, but it's reviewing the 3 proposed zoning maps that would shift 2,000 students to the high school from overcrowded area, other high schools.
Well, I know like in Texas, they've been doing what Lynn was saying with the affordable housing, like in certain sections of the city that were already predominantly low income, is that they were issuing really big bond packages that were making the property taxes so high that like even affordable housing wasn't affordable anymore because the property taxes were. And again, like you said, like we don't know what they did with the last housing bond, like where they put it. It's like you're not getting what you feel like you're putting in for because it's not there.
And the guy who's going to be opening it, his name is Dr. Jaquin Garcia, a founding member of the Hispanic Education Coalition of Palm Beach County, who passed away in 2021.
Okay.
So.
Well, the thing is too, I've been saying this often, like I think that they want Black and brown kids to code the metaverse. And so if they can go into areas that are low income and then develop them as human capital, like those will be the impact markets. And so like it's really important that they get like the Latino community and the Black community and everybody on board with the program, because that's the cover for, you know, like no one's going to question whether or not we should build extended reality as a military video game. It's just like we want it to be equitable and diversified, you know, and low cost, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, that area that they're building is pretty much a Hispanic area, and they're focusing, like they said, on technology and then medical science. So
the biotech. Yeah, it'll be coding and biotech. This is just a couple other, this is in Hialeah. I guess it's a former racetrack that they're building apartments and charter school. So I think these units, these communities will be mixed. And again, I'm not against, like I live in a neighborhood that's walkable. Like I'm not against the idea, like on the premise of it. But once you build, like my neighborhood was built in the 1880s. Like it didn't have sensor technology. Like you were earning points for being a good person, walking, as you know, picking up trash as you walk down the street because you get a credit for it. One of the other, it says a charter school is coming to Liberty Square Housing, and that's in Miami, and that was with the Related Urban Development Group. So that's Stephen Ross, that's the Hudson Yards guy. So this was a redevelopment of one of the largest public housing projects in Miami, and they were building the charter schools into it. And then on this slide, this is actually from California, and I haven't had a chance to look at it in Florida, but there's so much money involved, like often the legislation is similar, where the public was paying rental assistance to the charter schools, like 75% of their rent assistance. And then the charter schools would create holding companies that would own the buildings. So essentially, like the government was paying off like their cash flow for their building. Beyond the tuition payments. It wasn't that they were paying for their rent out of the money that was coming on the per child basis. Like there was extra. So like it was a total scam of using the school as essentially sort of like a money laundering project.
Cash cow, yeah.
And the other thing about the education was that Florida was the first state to have an online public high school. So this isn't the charter part, this is public. And I remember like the Florida virtual school was really connected to INACOL, which back when I was doing all of my ed tech stuff, it was like always Florida, Florida, Florida. And at the time, I didn't really make the connection between the military simulation industries and the space industries and all of that as being Florida. But like, it's significant that Florida had this. And then it's like the oldest one, right? The oldest public high school, virtual public high school. And then I think in 2018, there was a big problem. Like there was a data breach. It says there was leadership instability, questionable hiring, self-dealing behaviors, inappropriate work environment, improper purchasing. Employees were conducting work unrelated to the virtual school time, billing for travel and unrelated expenses. Every single bad thing that you could do, they were doing. So they brought in Ernst & Young to do an evaluation the following year. And essentially, they were just like a wrist slap. And they're like, but you know, you could totally scale this as a franchise. This is a perfect free market model. Like this will save districts a whole bunch of money by franchising this program. And so essentially, it was just this whole slide deck was like a sales pitch for Florida Virtual School, even though clearly it was like a really, really corrupt model. It was crazy.
I know.
Okay, so we're just back to Flow. So this is from an article from last summer. Ousted WeWork founder's new real estate venture could start in Miami. Newman controlled entities have purchased thousands of apartment units in South Florida, and they have secured a construction loan for a new tower at Miami World Center adjacent to Coba, and their vision is to have a communal vibe. I guess that would be a vibing ant computer. And so the other thing about Florida, a lot of retirees, right? Like
Tons.
Yeah. So
it's like the perfect state to do all this garbage. Unfortunately.
Right. Well, so like who are they going to be pitching smart housing technologies to, right?
Yeah. Old people, robots to help them when they can't, instead of like having a nurse come in 12 hours a day, if they had a robot that just supervised and, gave them their food, checked their blood pressure, like right. They have so many different things they could use that for.
Yeah.
But old people down here are definitely a target population because they all retire here.
Right. And even the smart housing, like, because there is all of the narrative about sustainability, right? So there's going to be like smart air conditioning, high efficiency, smart appliances. All of that will be regulated, like if it's new construction. And then again, all of the pay for success tied to the health systems and the wellness. Right? You've got a nice climate, right? So you can be like, okay, it's time to go and have your walk. And they would, make sure you have your walk or do whatever. I don't know. For the younger ones or the more adventurous, like here's time for your paddleboarding yoga,
They already have like smart technology in some of the hotels down here too for vacation rentals. They already have.
Oh, for the surveillance? Like monitoring, like that your stuff doesn't get messed up. Yeah, Airbnb. I mean, I think Airbnb was really very much about that.
Definitely.
So, this image. So I have 8 ways smart homes are perfect for seniors. Biomedical monitoring, right? All the hospitals. Like, look at the growth in the hospitals. And then I do have a social impact bond. When I was doing my work around Tikkun Olam in Israel, that one of their pilot social impact bonds was, now this was during lockdowns, but was around loneliness in the elderly, and they were tech-based solutions. So they would be like somebody, like a little robot iPad with a funny cat talking to you or whatever. Like, so this, and again, Florida also has a lot of ties to Israel as well. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, like New York, Israel, like, New York. I'm sure that there are people who are looking at those market opportunities, like whatever happens, in Tel Aviv, probably show up in Miami before too long. So, and then
Israel, Jewish population down here too.
Yeah, definitely. And so Eve, my friend Eve, was she sent me a link. She's like, I think it was Eve. She's like, yeah, about Del Webb and like active living communities. And I had looked into Del Webb early on when I went to, I was doing that research into Howard Hughes and all of the military contracting. So Del Webb has a lot of smart housing and a lot of active adult, because that would be perfect for Pay for Success, the active adult. You know, you're retired, come generate some piezoelectric energy for our sustainability project, you know?
I know.
But what I didn't know about Del Webb, so he started off his Sun City in Arizona, so Phoenix, which is a lot of that going on. But then it said during the 1940s, he built military bases, including Fort Huachuca, which is the Center for Electronic Warfare. He literally built that fort.
Base.
Yes, electronic warfare military bases and a Japanese internment camp.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
Before moving into retirement communities. Isn't that
my
wild?
God.
And this is like in the 40s and 50s.
And then he helped the construction of the retirement homes.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. And then look, and then he became like in the 60s, he went into gambling in Las Vegas. And for a time, Del Webb's Industries was one of the largest employers in Nevada.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? A gaming pioneer and philanthropist. His impacts range from literally transforming and modernizing the gaming industry to introducing Southern Nevada to a new concept in retirement living.
Wow. And he was the largest private employer in Nevada.
Yes.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? So you've got military defense contracting, electronic warfare, internment camps, gambling,
Great idea.
and smart planned communities.
Great idea.
Can you not see this exactly melding with flow?
I know, it's so bad.
I'm just like, and that's why I'm like, well, you need to know the history. Like, I mean, like, oh my gosh,
I
like
mean,
it actually is. So thank you, Eve.
Together.
It all ties together. It all ties together. And Howard Hughes, like he actually was in Miami. Like the Howard Hughes like Medical Institute was in Miami. I didn't even include that slide, but like before it moved up to Bethesda or wherever it is now, it was in Miami, like his big estate.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So so the other thing is, we've talked about this some before. So you have elderly people. Evidently, Florida, the largest percentage of rehabs and they said it's actually not that there are that many people in addiction in Florida per se, like it's other states, but they're all located there.
It started out down. It was mainly kids from Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, every up east and up, even west and over. It started coming down to South Florida. They did a ton of insurance fraud. Some of the doctors that I used to go to are actually in jail right now because of the rehab industry and how they would just bill the insurance companies for outrageous amounts of money, like $2,500 for a urine analysis cup. They would charge them for services that didn't even exist, and then they would get, I think it was called patient brokering, because they would take people and work with, like if you owned a halfway house, you could then recommend if they relapsed, which they would incentive. It's almost like impact investing, right? Like you're incentivizing people to relapse. So then they would bank on you relapsing. So then they could send you to a rehab that they're affiliated with, and or they just pick people up and be like, if you come to our treatment center, you'll get free cigarettes, or if you come to our treatment center, you'll get free massages and therapy and all this stuff. And that was patient brokering. So a ton of people went to jail for that. So it kind of moved to Florida. Now they're starting to move to Texas, California. And Texas and California are mainly the two right now that are like booming, just like South Florida was.
Wow.
And Delray was like the mecca of it, Palm Beach County.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
I have a halfway house that lives on the same street as us, pretty much, on the other side of the street. They're everywhere.
I mean, you could imagine that would be set up as an impact market, right?
Totally.
And you could probably smart it up and then strip down the human staff and just put it under more surveillance, whatever.
Well, I can't imagine how it is now. They probably have so much stuff now because they had so many people come down. I mean, Delray, they had like a whole, actually people from our city, Palm Beach County, and then Delray, the sheriff, I think, of Palm Beach County Sheriff, They met with like officials from the US and China because there were so many illegal drugs coming into South Florida because of the rehab industry. So
wow.
It was bizarre down here. And it's total, like when you look at it, it's like for impact investing, that's like so perfect for that, you know?
It is.
I mean, not perfect, but it for
it's
them,
like an environment, right?
You know?
And then
Yeah.
if they can create like smart environments that have essentially sort of captive populations, right? Because you're like, well, you have to be under surveillance because you've broken society's rules, right? Just like people who are involved in the judicial system. Like you're like, okay, well, we won't put you in prison, but we'll let you be in this halfway situation, but we'll watch you. And then that's all of that. All of that is
they
training.
do that now.
Yeah.
They totally do that now too.
So
it's so bad.
Yeah. So I just have a slide here that has evidence that the Obama administration was using the opioid epidemic to prop up pay for success finance. And again, but the treatments aren't actually to get people clean forever.
No.
They're just meant to like keep you clean for a little while that you hit some whatever like threshold, data threshold, and then
the
relapse.
next service that they provide.
Yeah. And then there's another Pay for Success Finance from 2018 with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, and using Pay for Success. And a lot of it is linked to like children in households where somebody is in addiction. So, so like this, they're also incorporating the kids into the equation too, which is really messed up. And you can see this is apartments that will have mental health care and social services in Kissimmee. So those apartments are supposed to open in 2024. And I saw like the University of Florida has something called the Schimberg Center for Housing Studies. Started
I've heard of that.
in 1988. And so essentially they pull up all the data. So like that's what the academics do. They're like, okay, we need data to run these markets. So we're going to document the problem, right? We know this, it says here, 825,000 low-income Florida renters pay more than 40% of their income in housing. So there's no incentive to actually fix the problem. They're just like, okay, so we'll come up with some affordable housing like thing rather than actually figure out why that, like get people better wages or what have you.
Yeah.
And then that they have a data clearinghouse, right? This data clearinghouse is exactly what they need for the cost offset. That's a cost offset. Like once you have the eyes to see it, you're like, they need a cost offset to justify the incentives for workforce and affordable housing and wraparound welfare, social welfare housing in Florida. But they need the number to create like the justification, the paybacks for these people. Yeah, so affordable housing, supportive social services. This is from Capital One credit cards. Right? So just think of your Huma digital wallet. It's Capital One, George Overholtzer. He was the key guy. He was a founder of Capital One credit cards, and he went on to nonprofit finance fund and third sector that was doing all the Pay for Success pilots.
I think Capital One, is that the bank that's moving down here, or is that a different one? I can't remember.
They're
which
huge.
bank is moving.
I mean, Capital One doesn't actually it's just credit cards. It was like the first credit card that didn't have an actual bank. But
that's what I meant.
Like they have
there's something moving down here with that.
They have a whole huge area in North Dallas that I talked about this with Lynn in Plano. That during the lockdowns they were hiring almost 2,000 new programmers for AI. What is that for? What's that all about, right? And then this is this is wellness. This is from Orlando. Lyft Orlando shares why affordable housing isn't just about homes. And so they're like, yeah, well, we're not actually making homes, but we're doing a 30,000 square foot wellness center. Because wellness is really important. And that's what, so like this guy is talking about the need for this wellness center, right? Because that's going to be a data gathering area. And then they were talking about like the importance of corporate housing. And that Universal Orlando was doing 1,000 affordable apartments, and Walt Disney was doing 1,300 affordable apartments. So they're literally building company towns. Yeah. With wellness centers.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And then I don't know if you, I did a talk about social prescribing. And again, this is what like the resistance people don't get. Like, I'm like, wellness is the bigger, scarier thing. I mean, honestly, I'm not like to discount forced medical procedures you don't want, but like, what's coming is you under surveillance all the time, and this idea of your mental wellness or physical. And let's see, Jill Sonke, Sonke, is with the Center for Arts in Medicine at the University of Florida. And they're working with the World Health Organization on all of the social prescribing. So that'll be like your good behavior stuff. So in this one, Mark Andreessen, he's essentially just briefly talking about office conversions and converting office space into housing. And I'll just say, like, my friend Roxana, we were talking about this because she's in San Jose, and she's saying, you know, they want to convert offices into housing, but offices aren't meant for housing because there's actually not enough windows and there's not really enough facilities for people to live in them easily. Converting them is not easy. But I think that there's a reason. I think they want to essentially create like sleeping pods with no windows, and then put communal areas in the public spaces. So if you want daylight, you have to go be with people, and then all the beacons will track you.
And so we basically decided, like, we can't be in the business of partnering with people who are building the future if we're not living in the future ourselves. And so we basically said, we'll just do a hard reset. We'll become, sort of, say, remote-centric or sort of virtual-centric. I just approved a request. We converted, we still have our office because it's on a long-term lease. We converted it to hoteling. And I just signed off yesterday on converting my former office into apparently the new lounge. So I'm very excited to visit the new hangout space.
What he was saying is that they've changed up their offices to be a hotel, and his old office is now the lounge of the hoteling. So they've got this long-term lease and they're converting it into a hotel, but hotel and housing are similar. So this is just a slide talking about how San Jose, they're pushing housing and offices. I don't know if you remember hearing about this like a while ago, but UC Santa Barbara, that they got this big gift for a dorm that was supposed to hold some students, but none of them would have a window.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. And there's a New Yorker article from 2021. It said the nightmare of a windowless dorm room, and that this guy, Charlie Munger. And so I think that they're building the ant computer. Like, I really think that they're going to create dorm type housing with literally almost like we're living in a submarine, and you don't have any access to natural light. And then the only way is to go into a public space. And I think that's how the office conversions are going to go.
I know they're going to be doing that in Florida, because I think a lot of corporations like Bed Bath & Beyond and all these aging, like the mall is now going to be turning into a housing unit.
How do you turn a mall into a housing? There's no windows in a mall.
I know. So it makes sense though when you said that, because I mean, it's just terrible to live that way, but it's a lot of real estate too, though.
It is. And they don't want to tear it all down. So yeah, this is a New York Times article from.
It's like a prison.
Yeah, it is like a prison. Thousands of old cubicles sitting ghostly quiet. City governments and developers want to discuss what to do with all these offices. Let's re-envision them as a way to recatalyze our business district. So this one is I think that this is in West Palm Beach, it says. This is an older building. It's not like a new office. The Alexander Lofts, that they were redeveloping an old Bell Telephone office building. Like, and this is a masonry office building. But it's interesting because on the side, it has Alexander Graham Bell. So it's literally a switching unit that's reconverted like for housing. But this is just an example of it in Florida. But
it's like a prison.
Yep, I think it's going to be kind of like that. So just about the homeless stuff, like I was talking a little bit with Eve. She said that they're actually really hard on unhoused people in Florida. Like, she's like, I think it actually is easier to be in Philly than down here.
Philadelphia, like Kensington, I've never seen so bad in my life. It almost feels like it's on purpose, to push people out. And then grab up the real estate.
Yeah, because they want it because it's on the L. So they're like
they want people desensitized. They want to clean those neighborhoods out. So they're going to allow whatever that is to keep going on. And in Florida, it's kind of the opposite, which is strange. But Florida's also very spread out. So, like for example, in Lake Worth, Florida, where I work, that city used to be. East Boynton Beach and Lake Worth have always been a complete mess. The West, on the other hand, is like a mecca. They've built it up. It's a lot of, like Jewish women and Jewish men, and They move here from Israel, actually, and then you have like people from New York, and you just have like a richer upper class neighborhood out west. But in the east, where I'm at, it's always been a mess because we've never had people in place that actually try to make anything better, I guess, without like I don't want gentrification at all, but we never improved our area at all. And so Lake Worth used to be really bad, and there used to be tons of homeless. Like I'm talking like you couldn't drive down Dixie Highway, which is like the main street, without seeing people homeless. And then last year they just started cleaning it up like so fast, like just you didn't see anybody on the streets. And then they had everybody at one park, and everybody complained about it. So then they moved them all and they created like a homeless center for them to go to, like a shelter.
Yeah.
But in Florida, the homelessness is, you kind of don't see it as much as you do, like, you know, like Philly or Seattle or Cali or like other states that are more populated. Like, even though it's huge down here, everything's more spread out. So it's more room for people to like kind of hide, because they're super harsh on anybody that's in the streets.
Yeah.
So but they have a lot of homeless people, and they're going to have more with what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, if people are displaced out of the housing, if it flips, And you were saying like even if you own your property, it doesn't necessarily mean you're safe from unexpected costs, right?
No, not at all.
Because the insurance industries, and then these other like some of the sustainability stuff that's coming.
Yep, ours went up ridiculously this year. Our insurance for the entire condo, just ridiculous. And then last year my insurance companies actually dropped me, and I had to go with another insurance company, and they just charged me so much more money for it. So it's, you know, it's everything. But insurance down in Florida right now is like one of the biggest scams in my opinion, but they're just charging everybody an insane amount, so people can't afford it. So even if, besides the rent skyrocketing like 200%, and probably, I think Palm Beach County this year was like the highest, maybe this year or last year was like the most, the city where the rent went up so high.
Wow.
So like people think like California is bad, like it's nothing. Like Florida, Palm Beach County, the rents, people were getting bills from like, you know, if the rent was $650, it was now $1,400, just like that. There was no cap on it. There was no laws to prevent it. So a lot of people got pushed out with that too. So, and that's just, it's continuously happening. It hasn't slowed down either. So there's going to be a lot more displaced people coming up.
Yeah, for sure. And then that'll be part of this impact housing, I think.
Yep.
So just a slide, it talks about Florida having, you know, a large homeless population, and as rents soar and COVID persists, more older people are experiencing homelessness too. So then
there's actually a show, it's called Priced Out of it's in Palm Beach County, but it's like, they have like some clever name for it. Priced Out of Paradise is what it's called.
Okay. Wow.
And it's like an ongoing segment of this exactly.
Wow.
So.
Well, and this is just kind of going in with the office space stuff, but looking at, you know, a number of years ago, I think it was maybe 2018, but this started in 2020, that Bezos, the Amazon headquarters, had an 8-floor family homelessness shelter in downtown Seattle attached to their headquarters. And so again, it's like a corporate office setting. Once you've dedicated 8 floors to family homeless, like there's a huge problem. And you know, that's something that Cliff and I talked about in Seattle, issues with access. But I think they actually want this hive kind of living. Like, I think they're forcing people into co-living arrangements in the guise of fancier shelters, some sort of like mix of WeWork as a fancy homeless shelter, and just to normalize that. So then we have the section about Stephen Ross. I don't know. We talked a little bit about Stephen Ross. Do you want to say anything about him, or do you know like some of his developments down there in Palm Beach? Like, I know there's a lot of real estate that's going in.
There's a lot. I think he's pretty much everywhere though in Palm Beach County. Like, I think he's more like, to be honest, he's kind of spread out, but he's everywhere. You know,
he's got enough money to be like all of South Florida, really, I think.
Yeah, it's like scattered around, but taken over pretty much.
Right. Well, so this article, it says, do you qualify for workforce housing in Palm Beach County? You might be surprised. Like, you could actually make a decent salary and still, because everything is so crazy high, you could still like, and then this is an article mapping out Stephen Ross's South Florida conquests. So he started there and he's back. And I think there was maybe even like a recent interview where he's like, get ready. It's just going to keep growing. Like one of these hedge fund guys. There's going to be no stopping South Florida. And I'm like, well, if you believe everything you say about sea level rise and climate change, like you guys would not be doing this. So,
nope, exactly.
So
exactly.
And then just to emphasize, so here he is in the map, and again, a major supporter of Ron DeSantis among the other hedge fund billionaires. If people want to look at this later, and I'll include the link to the slides, this Wall Street Journal article, it's called Affordable Housing Empire Fuels Developers' Upscale Aims. And it's quite fascinating because essentially it talks about how Ross built his fortune. And he was a tax lawyer. So I think he grew up in maybe Detroit, and then he went to NYU, and he was a tax guy. And so what he was able to do is you get these credits for, and this has been going on like since the 70s or 80s, like, he's been in this game a long time. Yeah, the 1970s. There would be tax credits for having a certain subsidized housing in the developments. And so they would use those to finance the projects. But then often they wouldn't actually use the tax credit themselves. They would package it like a security, and there would be another trading company that would sell them to people who needed them to offset their taxes. So there was this whole secondary market in trading the credits. But what Ross was able to do was he could do both. He could, usually there were people who were the developers, and then there were the people who sold the credits. But he did both sides. So he got this economy of scale. And he really, the government regulations are really complex. And so he was able, if once you learn it, it's a skill and you've got it down, and nobody else has this skill. So then he would use the cash flow from the affordable housing that was steady to essentially underwrite payments in luxury housing. So he would be able to pay cash for things nobody could pay cash for, because he had this bankroll off the affordable housing, which is kind of messed up if you think about it. Let me see. It says 90% of the 37,000 apartments that Related owns, and his company is called Related Company, I think, in 16 states are government subsidized units. So 90% of his property is a government subsidy. And he's the chairman of Charter Mac, which sells the tax credits. And it says that they have financed more than 400,000 apartments. And it's
only a small percentage of that is even affordable too.
Yeah, exactly.
Down here in Palm Beach County now, I think you only have to have 3% of units total.
Why, to get the credit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're
only
not really.
3%. So it's not even affordable,
Yeah.
And they have no system, which I don't want it because it's more tracking, but they have no checks and balances as to if they're even honoring that system. So if you make X amount of money, they're not even double checking. So they're just allowing whatever, they're just allowing whoever wants to live there. So it's not really helping anybody out. It's just helping developers out.
Yeah.
Who want to tax break,
Well, and then I came across a story in the Miami Herald from 2017 that said that they were doing this deep investigation into South Florida affordable housing developers because they would get credits on the affordable housing, but just like you said, no one was keeping tabs. And so often they would vastly inflate the amount of money they said they were spending. And then the construction companies would kind of cut in on it. And so they would get to take a piece, and the developers would take a piece, and that they would overinflate all of the budgets and then outspend so that there wasn't any money left to do other affordable housing. And so they were investigating not just Related, but it said, other companies. That was just how you did the business, that you made up the numbers on the paper and then nobody was holding anybody accountable. So, I'm just trying to think of all of this corruption in play. I don't know. Maybe if it's on the blockchain, they won't be able to be that corrupt. But in the space, when I did a talk in Union Square in New York for one of these freedom resistance things in 2021, I was at Union Square, and I'm looking across the street to a building that Stephen Ross developed. And they have a percent for art program. So the facade was redone as a clock, this countdown clock, and then one section which was these rings with a circle, an oculus, and a George Washington hand, like benediction hand sticking out, and these rings around the masonry going down, and then this line, and it was called Metronome. And it was a really, really funky art project that took up this whole facade of this building. Now, the clock was later renamed a climate countdown clock because Ross is also in all of the sustainability spaces, like globally, he's all in the sustainability stuff. So I made this map called the project, the art piece was called Metronome. And I'm like, what? I just had this sinking feeling like there's something really not right with this piece of art. And so I made a map that I haven't really talked about a lot yet, but essentially it talks about the related companies and all their philanthropy. So they're in all sorts of homelessness, New York Housing Authority, Boys and Girls Club, After School Club, all of the blend stuff that'll be blended learning, backpacks of school supplies for poor kids, very hooked into stuff in Chicago and New York. And then Stephen Ross developed Hudson Yards, which is, one of the biggest redevelopments in New York. And among the tenants there would be like Ernst & Young, JP Morgan, Pfizer, BlackRock, Amazon, and Sidewalk Labs. And Sidewalk Labs is Google's smart city. And so it's this crazy tech-centered, really, really high-end area. And then Ross is also on the board of overseers of Cornell Technion. Now, Cornell Technion is doing all of the small data lab, health data tracking, and also was part of Commons Pass and the Commons Project, which was these biometric health passport things. And then he was also linked in with NYU, where he went to school in the law school, which was doing stuff with social impact finance and smart contracting. So like from this one art piece, you can see how it spins out into social impact philanthropy, really high-end like corporate development in smart housing and biomedical tracking, and then the smart contract space. And there he is, the World Resources Institute. So I think that's probably how all of the sustainability stuff that we started off with your map was like through the Ross Center of, smart, sustainable cities.
Yeah. He also did downtown West Palm Beach, the Rosemary.
Oh, so, wait, is that like corporate? Is that luxury stuff?
Yeah, I think it's like right near City Place pretty much, but it's like a downtown West Palm Beach area where it's a lot of money's there too.
Is it mixed use, like corporate and retail?
Yeah, it was like I think 2019 he did this, and I remember it was like Rosemary Square. And it was a mix of like corporate, and they also have like people that live too, but it's a lot of business.
Interesting. So all the affordable housing underpins these luxury developments. So again, just an image here that's talking about Hudson Yards and Sidewalk Labs having their corporate headquarters, and they were doing the smart development in Toronto that got pushed back. But it says, as a leading data-driven connected neighborhood, Hudson Yards is the perfect fit for us. It is not only technologically advanced, but more broadly will give us the opportunity to work with related visitors, residents, and businesses to use for the creative use of data and technology. So Sidewalk Lab seems to be like very much connected to Stephen Ross, and I would not be surprised if it's somewhere down the road. Flow is part of this because they're all networked in New York. These would be all people would be all at the same cocktail parties, I'm sure. So so he helped establish Cornell Technion. There's his image. It was made possible with a generous gift from Mr. Ross, and he's on the board. And Deborah Estrin, she's the one who's doing smart tech at the Small Data Lab and the National Science Foundation Center for Embedded Network Sensing. And they want to literally look at all the groceries that you buy. She's described as a health tech pioneer. So she's there over at Cornell Tech, and Julianne and I went out there last week. And just all of the management, I'm not going to play this, but this I showed this a little bit earlier about the Babcock Ranch. And just this idea of tech invading all of our bodies and our lifestyles, And you came across, you were the one who told me about Babcock Ranch too.
Yeah, I accidentally stumbled upon it when I was coming home from my mom and dad's house. I actually got lost, and it was literally like the middle of nowhere. But on Babcock Ranch Road, they are building an entire new smart city community that they're going to have. You know, if they like the 15-minute city thing, that would be an example of that.
Yeah.
Because everything's going to be there: school, grocery stores, homes, housing, everything, doctors. You know, I'm sure it's just going to all be one mecca of a city, and it's going to be their first trial run, I guess you could kind of say.
And yeah, they had that thing
smart.
set up with Florida Light and Power too, all of the solar stuff.
FPNL,
Yeah, definitely.
a ton of that.
Well, this is they're asking like what good examples are of smart cities, and here Andresen mentions Disney and Epcot.
Are there any model cities that are sort of doing this right from a regulatory standpoint, from a building standpoint, from a community neighborhood standpoint? And then part two is sort of what role does government have to play in sort of facilitating and improving either, you know, home building, home ownership, and all of these components? So we'll start with
Mark.
Mark, yeah.
Well, look, cities were startups at one point, right? Like, so every city was a startup.
Cities were startups. And see, to me, this seems to sort of feed into the DAO, this idea of like turning a 15-minute community into a smart DAO.
And you know, there's like incredible stories if you go back far enough, like creation of cities like Los Angeles or Washington D.C., you know, for that matter. You know, in the 20th century, that kind of went, at least in the West, that kind of went out of fashion, became sort of an intractable thing to try to do. You know, there were some entrepreneurs who thought hard about it and gave shots at it. So Walt Disney, right, had a whole vision. You know, and what, you know, the Disney company.
He certainly did.
Which makes me question what the real deal is between DeSantis with Disney.
Oh yeah,
Because
remind me.
you know,
So what
they-
did he do? He pushed back on some of their.
Yeah, so they blew up the whole, like, they politicized the heck out of everything, and Disney was against the Don't Say Gay bill, which was basically just, you know, like about education, and it's just all political to me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all the political crap. So then DeSantis was like, well, we're not going to pay anymore, because I believe like the public pays, or Disney controls, I believe, everything. And they're doing, I didn't pay much attention to it, to be honest, because it was so political that I just didn't care to. But
Yeah.
I think like they're trying to, DeSantis is now saying that you're no longer going to be able to do certain things, but that would also cost the public if he did that. So I'm not entirely sure what he's doing, but there was some controversy with that. So it makes me wonder, like, there's got to be more to it, you know,
Right. Like it's
than what it is now.
it's a public spat that's advancing something.
Yeah.
Company to this day has these, you know, planned communities that kind of come from that. You know, Walt Disney actually had this vision he actually had this thing called Epcot, the experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
You can see it in the museum in San Francisco. If you go to the museum, you can see it.
Oh, is that right? Okay, yeah.
The whole thing. It's
Well, I think they still have the Epcot. What the part of Epcot that got built, I think, is still in Florida. So you can go visit. I think the remnants of Epcot. So you know, this is like sort of futurism from the '60s. You know, kind of in Disney's mind. He wasn't able to he passed away. He wasn't able to fully develop Epcot, but he was kind of reaching in this direction towards the end of his career. And then, you know, there are other examples in the U.S. You know, it's probably Irvine. You know, took a big.
Yeah, so that's mostly it, just like Disney but the experimental prototype city of tomorrow, and I think GE was involved in that too, was involved in like the idea of it, and again, as a purpose-built community. I remember I went to Epcot once when I was growing up, but you know,
I've been there.
yeah, and again,
Many
like
years
I
ago.
guess the icon is this spaceship Earth, which is the big, you know, circle stuff.
So I found out, I just wanted to look it up real fast. So it says that since the passage of the Florida Parental Rights in Education Act, known by its critics as the Don't Say Gay bill, the Walt Disney Company has been involved in a feud with the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, and it basically allowed DeSantis to take away Disney's special status in 2022, and it's the abolishment of the district. So now I think DeSantis sits on the board that oversees the development of Disney World, which is really interesting. So it became private to like public-private type of thing.
Oh, it went from private to public-private. Oh, that's interesting.
I think that's pretty much what, I'm not 100%.
Because they probably, like, did it have control of its own zone? It was probably its own government, the government of Disney.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So they're merging now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, in Hansen Robotics,
there's so much more.
The guy, is it David Hansen? He got his training at in Dallas, and his early, like, so the Sophia the robot guy, like, his early training was in animatronics with Disney. So Ben Goertzel did the AI brain, but I think it's David Hansen. Like, he was the animatronics guy, and he was a Disney guy. Like, so again, it's starting to feel a little bit like a Netflix series or something.
I know.
Like Westworld or something like that. So yeah, so I just have an image there of Epcot and this idea of new urbanism, and that Florida being sort of like the center of new urbanism, this idea of walkable cities and Celebration, which I think was the Disney model town that came after Epcot. Again, the other piece of this, and we've talked about it a little bit, is that the largest private landowner in Florida is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they have this huge ranch, the Deseret Ranch, 300,000 acres, the Deseret Ranch and Citrus Company, that's owned by the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and could include as many as 10 new urbanism towns, the first of which, Sunbridge, is under construction. And so there's this whole book that is looking at these new urbanism towns, and like ultimately the idea of the 15-minute city as being sort of grounded in the LDS Zion land organizing system of like manifest destiny, which is kind of interesting to think about it because Florida's pretty flat too. So like the idea of a plain, you're a sandy plain as opposed to like a grassland plain, but it's suitable to a grid because there's not a lot of topography to interfere.
Yep. And there's tons of water, very low elevation too.
Yeah. Let's see. So there's just Celebration. So that's the Disney thing. And I got a little confused because I was trying to think about the Truman Show movie and like where that came from, but it wasn't Celebration, it was Seaside. So Celebration was the Disney one. And again, it's this idea of like, management, like a master plan community that's outside of normal government. And I think that's something that like Jason has brought up to me, this idea of the homeowners association, or like sometimes even the developers. He said in Colorado, developers are setting up entities to tax people separately than the government. And that's a lot of power. Like if you're living in a place that is controlled by not your typical local elected official, navigating that, or like layers of bureaucracy, like you've got your local elected official and then you've got some other group of people who are managing. It's interesting to think about. It's a lot. So yeah, so there's the Truman Show, just a few images that it was at Seaside, and this was sort of the birth of new urbanism. And I mean, honestly, it's a pretty lovely looking place. I mean, I guess that's the point of the Truman Show, is like, oh, look, it's like so dreamy. You've got these lovely homes and porches and everything's walkable, but like, there's this sort of dark underside. And eventually like, Truman starts to realize that he's being watched like for a reality TV show. And there's this guy up in outer space in charge of all the cameras, watching this person grow up, his whole life, only it's a reality TV show he doesn't know he's in. And that's kind of crazy to think about AI, right? Like if instead of Ed Harris sitting up there in the director's chair, it's AI and the sensor networks. I feel like that this was really a hat tip to what they imagine is coming. And it's quite something that it was sort of situated in Florida. And the other thing is, so Seaside was built, it's on the coast, on the Gulf Coast. And the guy who built it, he was the grandson of this guy, Joseph Smolian, who was a department store owner in Alabama. And so he had bought this thinking they would maybe build a summer camp for their company, and it didn't happen. And so that's why there was this 80-acre parcel that came about that was his grandson redeveloped. But what I thought was really interesting is that the Smolians, who were had this department store in Birmingham, Anniston, Bessemer, Gadsden, Montgomery, and Chattanooga, and he was the vice president of the company, that he and his wife were funding the psychiatric clinic at the University of Alabama. Like early on, like in the 50s, it says in 1959, they donated $100,000 to create the Smolian Psychiatric Clinic, the first building constructed for Birmingham's planned medical center. And they donated their own home for use as a faculty club. And so I'm like, oh yeah, Mr. Smolian, like department store owner, and he happens to like essentially set up psychiatric, and like it doesn't say Huntsville, but like Huntsville, Alabama is where all the Operation Paperclip Nazis went, and like the NASA space program.
To do that.
I'm like,
It's like a really interesting time to be opening a psychiatric unit.
right? And then like later on, the land that he buys gets turned into Seaside, where they film the Truman Show. It's a little bit odd. So here's just a couple of images, like, you know, donors honored. Mr. and Mrs. Joe Smolian were honored at the University of Alabama Saturday night, you know, essentially for endowing, you know, the medical center. And then there's a picture of it. It's a really unattractive building. It's like a 1950s, like modern, 1966, I guess. It's a 1965 press photo. So I don't know if that's when it was finished, but it's sort of an unattractive brick modern building. So, and the other thing about Seaside is that there's a whole research portal about it as a planned community that's run out of Notre Dame.
Wow.
And Notre Dame, the business school of Notre Dame is what worked with the Vatican to develop like all of the impact finance stuff, like the 3 impact finance conferences with Ronald Cohen and Piero Mediar with the Vatican. They were run through Notre Dame Business School. So like, why does Notre Dame have a research portal for Seaside? That's like another weird thing. And so I'm almost done here, Brandi, but we've got like this idea of the convergence of Mormon community building and new urbanism. And so this is from a company that's working in the Salt Lake City area that's very involved in the new urbanism framing, and essentially they're making this link between the plat of the city of Zion that was penned by Joseph Smith in 1833 and this idea of new urbanism, which, like, again, I think you could layer in the 15-minute city. Let's see, it says the plat of Zion had defined center and edges, a compact urban design, a connected street network, prominent buildings located in the center. Architecture is reflective of the region, mixed housing and community. And then they compare that to new urbanism, where they say neighborhood is limited in physical size, well-defined and focused edges, a connected street pattern, mixed use, mixed housing, architectural codes, prominent buildings in preferential building sites.
And honestly, that to me looks like if you looked at like papa.gov and Palm Beach County property appraiser, and you just looked at like where I'm at, it just looks
like that. Yeah.
It looks like that.
It looks like that. I know. Welcome to new urbanism. Yeah. And so this is just this is a number of, this is 2017, but from The Guardian, from book to boom, how the Mormons plan a city for 500,000 in Florida. So there is like these plans for a big city that's coming. I guess Osceola County is where they approved the North Ranch sector plan that covers 133,000 acres. So of course you got the 33 in there of the Deseret property. Yeah, so that's that. And then this is this Northeast District. And there's something called the Medical City in this region in Osceola County. So they're developing a biomedical cluster, which is, I guess, not a big shocker, but there you go. I think it's like Lake Nomo or something like that. 24,000 acre development announced for Mormon lands in Orange and Osceola counties. And this is what's so interesting. Literally, the developer is called Tavistock, which is like the psychological, UK psychological stuff, right? The Tavistock Development Company is developing for the LDS Church in Florida.
And I believe like that area, I was just trying to look, I think that's the area where a lot of the, where I was looking at opportunity zones, I think that's a big area of it as well.
Well, that would make sense. Yeah, because you would want to maximize that. So this is just the last few slides. So my friend Julene shared with me essentially the plan for the first 15-minute city, which is in Draper, Utah. And it's literally on the site of a former state prison. So there's this big chunk of land that they can like develop all at once. And this is an executive summary from Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, which is a very prominent like architecture and engineering firm. And so this is laying out what their plan is. And then this slide just it has a picture of the prison. Utah State Prison in Draper is pictured. And so this is from 2018 that the commission approves a critical planning scenario for point of the mountain development. And Utah is building a 15-minute city from scratch. So they're literally, it's kind of like with what's-his-face Del Webb, right? Okay, we've got electronic warfare and internment camps and gambling and smart. Well, now we've got prison and then we have 15-minute city. So isn't it kind of crazy? So this is what it looked like. They have a detailed land use map of this area that's the prison. It's all connected to transit and all this stuff. Now, it's like, again, I live in a city. I ride the bus. I don't bike as much anymore, but I should bike more. Like, I'm not against these things in concept. I'm against these new developments being built as social computers. That's what I'm against. I'm against micro housing. I'm against like dehumanized way of living. And this is what's so frustrating is like, I was just trying to look up the thing with Trump's new freedom cities. And the thing I saw, it was like, those right-wing crazy people are against the 15-minute city. They just don't like biking and things like that. They're just assholes. Like they're so stupid. And I'm like, so like if you reduce the conversation to that, you can't talk about ubiquitous sensing environments and smart digital twin cities and like people.
He's just dressing it up as like he's literally just like, oh, well, you don't like the UN SDGs and you don't like Agenda 2030. Well, come move to my freedom city, which is a replica of that.
Yeah.
They're just filtering people in that way now. It's crazy.
It is crazy. But the thing is like
flying cars, technology, like, I'm like, hello.
But the fact that he's picked that up means that reasonable people aren't allowed to have the conversation to say like, you know what? Yeah, I like bike lanes and I like to be able to walk to my grocery store or a farmer's market for sure, but I don't want to be under total surveillance. I don't want it to be a Web3 connected environment. I don't want like all of these surveillance infrastructures put in the name of sustainability. I don't agree with any of those things. So you can't have that conversation because it's like you're either with Trump and the crazy people or you're with us, good, progressive, sustainability people, and you can't have something in between, which is really frustrating. But here they have the elements of a smart city. So they want to control everything, literally: society, quality of life, environment, government, economy, and mobility. All of it is together. And like quality of life includes culture and well-being, health and safety. So that's all sensor technology and social prescribing. And then it talks about the physical infrastructure, which it has like a bunch of circles. The biggest circle in the middle is ICT infrastructure, individual communication technology. It's part of the buildings. It's part of the manufacturing. It's part of the electrical bid, water, safety, healthcare, education, mobility. Everything is based on the tracking device, all of it. So none of it is real in terms of real relationships. And this is something that Julianne has talked about in the past, but this idea of like the universities being anchor tenants in the smart cities, like the cognitive cities, because that's their plan here in Utah, is to like have anchor hubs of tech and university cross-sector partnerships. You'll have a regional business catalyst, and then you'll have like a university connected to it. Let's see, among the key vision elements, so placemaking, you'll hear a lot about that, creative placemaking and healthy living. They want to have, part of their placemaking is neighborhood data hubs. Because nothing says like I care about my sense of place than a data hub. Shared space includes micro mobility, which are all the stupid scooters and everything.
Oh my God.
New residential types. Provide alternative housing such as micro units. Like, raise your hand if you want to live in a micro unit. Nobody wants to live in a micro unit. That's dehumanizing.
No.
Wired for digital innovation, and you have to address housing affordability. Well, the housing affordability is the micro units, which are like your matrix pods. And then it
Exactly.
talks about smart city components, including, so it talks about micro units, but right next to micro units is tokenization, new real estate models. So to me, that's where Flow fits in. And they want to make room for drones, and they want to make rooms for autonomous delivery operations. And they want to make sure they have high security. So,
Yep. And they want to be able to predict it before, so they know what to bring you.
exactly.
You're ordering online.
So I hope for people like that, that's it for the slide part, but just like, I feel like Florida is such a test bed because of the tech corridor, the space corridor, which is the satellites, which are going to be like tracking everything, the geolocation data, because of the craziness with ed tech, because of the kinds of people,
the politics, the people, the diversity, just everything down here.
And I mean, and you haven't lived there for a really long time. I mean, you're not like a native of Florida, so you can probably see it in a way that other people can't.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people that are native to Florida, I mean, they just think it's all real estate. They just think that, oh, everybody just wants to move here because it's so beautiful, and they're the ones making the prices so inflated. You know, it's not the banks or, you know, the greedy big corporations or the big, you know, developers that own all of these, you know, apartments. Like, oh, it's the people that move here. It's their fault. And, you know, anything to get them looking at each other instead of them.
Right.
You know, so fight with each other, but not them. So the native Floridians they don't see the digital part. They just think it's getting more populated, and it's the fault of the people moving here.
Right.
So
Well, I
it's
wonder
kind of like
about like the Miami crypto scene, though. I mean, I guess they see it as like growing the economy, right? Like they don't see it as building a prison.
Yeah, and they also make it popular, you know, like they have it's almost like a religion, right? Like the crypto thing, like it's, you know, it's like having a group of people who are just completely just, you know, they're just blinded by any rational thought or thinking, and they just believe in this one thing. And I mean, everybody thinks that, you know, oh, well, crypto's the next big thing. The banks aren't tracking it, so it's not like, you know, and they don't care about smart contracts because they probably don't even know what that is. So they're just like, oh, whatever, it's no big deal. So they make it cool and appealing to people. So like, you know, if Miami and everybody from Cali and all the tech people are moving to Miami as well.
Right. They normalize
so it's like becoming a cool thing to do. So it's like a phase now. So they don't really get it, you know, the way that I see it. But
right. I mean, are you seeing the smart technologies like in the infrastructure, like street lights, or are you seeing like the smart technologies, like the public infrastructure?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, when COVID hit, like literally like those 2 years, I mean, our entire street just had every single corner. I mean, they were putting up 5G towers. They have more license plate scanners and readers. You can't get into like Lake Worth without being scanned and being read and being identified. Like,
wow.
It's completely like when I would go to the city council meetings, I would refuse to let them, you know, do the whole face scan. So it's just been so fast. It's been implemented super quickly, and nobody's really been.
Well, tell me about the
back.
face scan thing. I think I remember, but like, what was that?
So they said it was for your temperature, but I don't buy it because they could have just used that little gun thing.
Yeah.
But they wanted you to just walk up like straight and then go like this and like put your head in like the square box thing, and it would read like your retina, or I think it was scanning the retina.
Yeah.
And then it would take your temperature, but it would like read your biometric data pretty much, you know, like your surveillance, like facial
And that was to
recognition.
attend a city council meeting?
Just to get in and speak.
Wow.
And they blamed it all on COVID, so, which is complete bullshit, but you know, they that's what they blamed it on, was you need to take your temperature because it's not, you know, if you're sick then you can't enter. But it's like, well, I brought my own thermometer.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So that's how I got around that. But other people didn't care. They didn't even have a problem with it. So it was like, you know, it's like, wow. I mean, and now it's like more self-checkout lanes are coming. I mean, where I'm at, Walmart used to have people working. Now it's like 2 people open, and then it's like the rest is just all shut down, and it's all automated scanning systems. Publix too, they installed a bunch of new ones, and a lot of the hospitals did similar things too with their infrastructure. So it's moving along fairly quickly in Florida.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I definitely want to have a longer conversation later about the education stuff, because I know that that's, the more I looked into that and the connections between the MacArthur Foundation and they're going to be training these kids.
We had the Jinko Bioworks people down here. We had the Bill Gates, MacArthur. We had the Rockefellers. We had a ton of people in Palm Beach County lobbying. So,
wow.
Or giving grants that were,
And a lot of it was like the after school stuff too, right? Like the out of school time learning.
Yep.
Well, I guess we'll just have to keep an eye on Flo and the Miami area and see their creative finance systems.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 of it too, and being more in depth with it, because there's still so much more in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, is there any something big that I missed that you want to sort of talk about before we close out?
Well, I mean, a lot of the banks are also buying up property in Florida too.
Okay.
That's another thing that's been happening, is a lot of the homes are also vacant, but they're owned by banks. And so people, they're jacking the rent prices up ridiculously, and then people aren't able to afford it. And then the insurance is also another thing I want to look into. I don't know too much about it, but I know there's something going on with the insurance companies, because all they're doing, and it has to do with hurricanes too, because, climate change and the tide study. So we just had a tide study done. I don't even think people here knew it happened, but they did a tide study right where I'm located and a bunch of other coastal communities. And they're rating we're in a flood zone, obviously, because the water's right there.
Right.
So any flood zone areas are prone. You automatically have to have a certain type of insurance now. So they're mandating it for you, even if you don't have a mortgage. So they're still trying to say even if you don't have a bank mortgage, that you should still have this type of insurance. And so, excuse me, I think insurance is another thing.
Leo's been looking into that so much, because not just the main insurance, but then the reinsurance industries and all the parametric stuff.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. And I feel like a lot of that's tied into with developers, obviously, and different government programs too. So, I mean, we could do that next time, because I really don't have anything here to show you or anything.
Yeah,
but
well, it's interesting what you said about the banks buying things up and keeping them vacant, because actually there's somebody that I was in touch with who was in the Chicago area and saying this is someone who owns their own business and who literally can't get an apartment, and they can see that there's stuff, but they're not available, they're not opening them up for rent. So, and that's one of the big things. I mean, I don't know that they didn't develop it, but WeWork became the largest office leaseholder in New York. And then Jason was questioning, did they actually develop all of that, or did they just acquire it to push the market a certain direction?
Yeah. And that's pretty much that's what I'm trying to figure out, because they've purchased, and they'll always do it either through shell companies or through some other they'll rename. It's not going to be it's not going to be listed as the bank that's buying it. It's always under a different shell company or entity. So I'm really interested to see what they're doing, because they're acquiring a lot of homes, but they're not renting them out, and they're not really selling them. And then the ones that they are, they're just doing it sky high so that people can't afford it. Yeah. So there's more I have to do research.
Well, it's interesting, because I remember, I don't know if it was Blackstone, after the last housing crash, they became the largest private rental home. So this isn't multifamily, but individual rental homes. And although I guess it could be condos too. And somebody I knew that was doing bankruptcy work in Florida said at some point, they just said no more. You can't actually get any more of these houses. Because they weren't renting them again. They were just getting them and holding them. Acquiring
it. Wow.
Yeah. So.
And then, with the condominiums, I mean, that's just a perfect way to take land from people. You know, like I've talked about this before, but just with everything that we went through in this building, has just been out of control. I mean, we had a board that literally was just bizarre, that the way that they thought that they could do things. Like, they just walked into us, and one, we're mismanaged, two, our finances are depleted completely, negligence, criminal activity, everything you could think of. And so you have people that will come in and take advantage of that. And then you had the governor, because of the Surfside condo collapse in Miami, where Israel actually sent people in to like help the cleanup or whatever.
Yeah.
Ever since then, when they passed like a bunch of new laws, like tons of new laws,
Right.
That really made it pretty much impossible for like normal people to actually afford condos after that. And now you actually have banks teaming up with it and saying, well, we're not going to give you any financing. You're going to have to put all cash down, or else we're not going to back you, because they don't want to give you a mortgage on the
Wow.
condos if they're over a certain year old, or if they have a certain amount of problems, or if their finances aren't good, or whatever the excuse is, they're using it. And so you have a lot of weird corruption going on in that sector too.
Wow.
So
Well, because
it's just
probably on
another-
some of this stuff, they want to get rid of the older housing, I would assume, and like consolidate
Definitely.
parcels and get bigger things. So if you can,
Yeah.
like,
just expand like Palm Beach Island and those types of rich people, and just take all the coastal areas that are still, you know, I mean, that last hurricane we had, Ian and Nicole, just completely destroyed, you know, like all like the regular areas where Sarasota and Port, and then Charlotte, and all those really cool, laid back, middle
Right.
class people, just wiped them all out. And now, just like they did with the Keys, once that happens, you know, people are obviously going to go with $8 million from a corporation, as opposed to like the $800,000 that they could get from their insurance company. So
right.
as soon as that happens, corporations acquire all of that. So they're just buying up more and more coastal land and areas. So it's pretty bad, you know? But there's just so much stuff going on in Florida. It's changing so rapidly, even as far as like Panama City and like up in like the Panhandle, which like nobody cares about the Panhandle of Florida.
Yeah.
Like they're just Tallahassee, like they're buying land up. Nobody, like, it's like waging war on middle class people in Florida right now is what's happening.
Wow.
Between the insurance and the condos and the new laws that passed, and then the property value, and then just the taxes, and just rent and mortgages and banks and everything they're doing, food prices, like gas, like it's just, Florida used to be the state to retire in, but honestly, I don't really see that happening, because a lot of the people that did come down here to retire are going to be really hurting, you know, in
Yeah.
the next few years. And it's going to be
People who came under the old way of it being. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to end up moving to like Georgia or Alabama or somewhere up. They're not going to be able to afford it here.
Yeah.
So Florida's a really interesting case study, I guess you could say, with this, because it just from what I've seen, I haven't lived here more than, it's maybe like 9 years now. And probably, I don't even know if it's 8 or 9 years, but just from what I've seen since I've moved here has just been, you know, it's just astounding at how much it's changed. So
I was hearing, I can't remember if you or Eve, like the agriculture, because I think I was saying something about the
Oh, that
citrus,
too.
and they're like, oh no, it's gone. Like,
oh, that's gone.
They're
Our
like-
citrus is gone. We used to be like, you know, our fruit, like the oranges, like they made people come and chop down everybody's trees for like citrus greening, and like some crazy bug from China that like destroys whatever. And I forget what it was called, what type of disease it was from the citrus, but they came out and cut everyone's fruit trees down in the backyard that was like grapefruit or oranges, and then our fields just got completely destroyed. And you know, I don't know if it was planned or not, but in my opinion, I don't know. To me, I just, you know, that's a lot of farmland and a lot of land. And
Yeah.
even if when I go up to see my parents' house, like there's a shit ton of farms up there, and they're all for sale. So
Wow.
it's really depressing. Like, and now Bill Gates, I think, owns like the most farmland in Florida, which is like
wow.
super depressing. You know what I mean? And to see more farms for sale, it's just, you know, at some point I wish Floridians would stand up and be like, no, enough, but they don't, because everybody's going to want the money because they're broke. So
Right.
it's either they're getting, the farmers are getting eaten alive in Florida, the small farmers. And so of course they're going to go with whatever option they can to feed the family. And they're not giving them a great option. You know,
Right.
it's kind of a manipulated, pre-planned like move that they're doing to them. So it's really bad in Florida, actually. It's crazy how different it's becoming. Really
I
fast.
know you've been fighting, you know, stuff for a while.
Yeah, a lot.
They've been putting you through. And I appreciate like having your perspective on all of it, because again, like regular folks, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like everybody's gonna be left behind, or they're gonna be turned into one of these impact commodities with their, you know, your apartment digital wallet and your good behavior tokens.
I feel like I've lived through all of it. You know, I feel like I've lived through, like I've seen the whole rehab thing, I've seen the real estate, I've seen the farming, like it's
You've
just
seen the school stuff.
And it's only,
yeah.
it's like, you know, not even a whole decade. So I mean, I came down here 10 years ago, which was 2012, actually, and to see the difference now compared to then, it just blows my mind, you know. And it's not slowing down, you know, and I'm sure everyone experiences this in their own town. I mean, down here in Broward, we had that whole epidemic when they had pill mills that were, you know, the opiates.
Right.
And so we had doctors popping up left and right, like making a ton of money off of people who were addicted. And then they shut that all down, and then it became heroin. So then after that, they started the whole rehab center, which is complete impact investing like heaven, you know, because now you have people that are predictable. You can predict their behavior.
Right.
You know, the addicts, like only 1% gets clean. So, I mean, you have that 99%, you know what I'm saying, of like probability that they're going to mess up and that they're going to need more services. So, I mean, it really, like, Florida is just like a mecca of like all of this stuff that's happening. And if I would have never researched any of this, I would have never even seen it that way, because I would have just been like, wow, you know. So that's what I try to do when I go to the meetings and stuff. When I used to go to the city council meetings, I really wouldn't go to speak to them. It was more to try to get other people to listen for 3 minutes, which, you know, some of it worked, but mostly it kind of just fell on, you know.
Well, you plant some seeds. You plant some seeds. I mean, the other thing that I'm curious about is like also the faith-based stuff in Florida, because I know like there's this push for like free markets and like the conservative side, and also the faith-based stuff, because like I can see that all getting woven into the impact finance space.
Totally. And because people, I mean, you know, DeSantis, like freedom, we're the anti-lockdown state. I mean, even though it really wasn't like that completely, especially not in South Florida, it wasn't, but I mean, it's just the whole pitch that they're using. And so it's like a perfect, you know, to corral a bunch of people into thinking that you're doing something good when you're totally not, you know. And then you have it's just so diverse down here, you know. I mean, they could pretty much pull it all off, and it sucks, but they totally could if they wanted to. So I hope people like really start to look into what their city's doing and like what's changing, and ask themselves why it's changing, not you know, like what's happening, but ask why it's happening, because that's what I've been trying to do, you know, like
understanding the structure. And again, you control like food, water, and housing. Like those are the basic things in people's livelihoods. You know, if you can control those things, you've really
control everything.
Yeah. And the housing is big. I mean, because they're always talking about the wallet spend. Well, if you're spending 30 to 40% of your income on housing, you don't really have much wiggle room to do anything else. Like, you don't.
Exactly. Like I don't have room to do anything else, really. I feel like, you know, it's like between all the things that have happened, I mean, my bills went from like, I mean, it's like I have like 2 mortgages right now, just because they went up like from when I moved in, it was like $255 for HOA fees, and then they moved it to $325. They just like doubled that completely to like $650 in just condo fees, and then that's not even counting the separate assessment of $550, and then you have the mortgage, then you have your gas and food and bills and everything else. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Wow.
But it's happening everywhere. So.
Yeah. Well, it's good that we talk about that with people, you know. So,
Yeah.
because if I hadn't sort of been privy to your experience, like I would have no idea that people could be kind of caught up, like, off guard about all of these fees and changes and.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like people don't even. I mean, there's, like I said with the condo thing, it's huge. The condo problem is huge because I don't know where these senior citizens are going to go. I mean, you know, these people are on fixed income. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to go to these little impact centers where they're going to be tracked and surveilled and given the amount of food. And did you do this today? Did you do that today? Well, you get more of this if you did that. And it's going to be like absolutely crazy, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, I just feel bad for the old people and everybody really who's going to have to live through it if they don't
Right.
stop it. But
And the kids who are going to be trained to build it, right?
yeah, exactly. But that's why your work's so important, you know, because you actually see, like, you actually look into what's actually being, like, when they look back and say, like, well, how did this happen? And it's
Like,
well, this
here's
is
the
how it
map. You want to
actually
see the map?
happened. Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly. Well, Brandi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we'll wrap up. So we're there's still one more section that Jason and I are going to do a last closeout and some more looking into sort of like the use of hospital systems and wellness centered stuff in the affordable housing space. And we're linking it to, I don't know if you ever saw that movie, Sorry to Bother You. It was like a Bruce Riley book.
I Googled it because you had mentioned it before, so I was going to watch it because I never saw it before.
Yeah, I feel like
it.
I need to revisit it. It's sort of like this, the idea is that people have these work contracts, like for these company towns, and they have to live in dorms, but eventually it turns into some crazy biotech experiment with horse people. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I need to watch that then,
all right.
because that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, thanks everybody for joining
Thank you.
in.